These are the Kenda KrossCyclo clinchers, and back in the bad old days of cyclocross, and long before gravel riding became its own specific thing, these were a really popular option for converting your road bike into something that you could take off-road. They still have a bit of a cult following these days, because they allow you to easily convert an old 10-speed road bike into a passable cross bike. When taken on its own merits, the KrossCyclo is actually a really good cyclocross tire, but an even better gravel riding tire, especially if you want to try either one of those out on the cheap. Now, depending upon how you look at it, this is either a skinny knobby tire or a low volume cyclocross tire. This is the 27-inch version, which is the most common size. So if you have an old British or American road bike that use that 27-inch standard, this is the one to look for. A 700C version does exist, don't ask me why, but this is the most common one that you're going to find for sale both online and in the shops. Some of you will be glad to know that this tire measures a UCI legal 33mm wide and features an alternating chevron pattern that was really common back in the days before riders owned a quiver, as they say, of tires. Today we would call this an all-rounder, which is to say that while it's good at everything, it's great at absolutely nothing. In reality, this is just an old BMX pattern scaled down to fit the narrower surface of the road tire. Cyclocross tires have become a lot more refined and specialized since the heyday of this tire. However, the KrossCyclo will still handle pretty much anything you put it through, just as long as you ride within its limitations. And the greatest limitation is that you have to run this tire much higher pressures. Compared to a modern 700C cyclocross tire, which you might be able to run at 15, maybe even 10 psi without worrying about pinch flats, I found that the sweet spot with this tire is 35 psi in the back and 30 psi in the front. That gives you a good balance between flat resistance and handling. Any more and you're washing out the corners. Any less and the tire becomes way too squirmy. However, once you find the sweet spot on pressure, this is a really capable tire. Unless your name is Wout van Aert, you are never going to find yourself on the pointy end of a cyclocross race while riding on these tires. However, if you're giving these tires any serious thought, you're likely racing in a much lower category, in which case you're still going to be in the race, probably gobbling up all the spots given up by people who've inflated their own cross clinchers to the recommended PSI printed on the side of the tire. The KrossCyclo rides best over grass, hard-packed soil, and light mud, which are the conditions that you'll find at a typical regional level race. So once you have the pressure dialed, you can pretty much ride any line you want without having to overthink it. The tire also has this really beautiful tan gum wall that kind of gives it the look of a handmade tubular. But aside from looking good, it also helps the tire deflect a lot more in the turns. So when the conditions are just right, it makes this really satisfying crunch sound that let you know the tires are gripping. And when you hear that, you know that you can be a little more reckless in your line choice. Like any tire, once you've gained an intimate knowledge of it, you can afford to be a bit more aggressive, even reckless with your line choice. However, there are some course conditions where these tires just flat out suck. One spot in particular, off cambers. I learned this the hard way my first year racing cross, when I slid down the face of an off camber in front of about 30 spectators. We're in the closing laps of the race, and I was sitting in maybe 10th place. And the only reason I got to 10th place was because every time we'd hit this off camber, most riders would get off and run, and I would ride it. Somehow, this tire hooked into the face of that off camber every single time, and each time I picked up maybe 2 or 3 spots. However, as the race wore on, so too did the course. So in one of those closing laps, the tires just didn't hook, and I went down hard on the side, and I went from 10th position to maybe 40th position. You know, I finished that race last, only above the riders who got lapped. The same needs to be said for grassy descents with tight turns and pretty much anywhere on the course where you're relying on these little tiny knobs on the shoulder to keep you upright. But the moral of the story is, know the tire and know when to run. But above all, don't take yourself or the race too seriously. And if you find you're having a lot of fun, you know, maybe invest in a cyclocross bike. But if you just want to show up and have a bit of fun with your friends, maybe take a cookie or even a beer hand up, these tires are perfect for that. As far as gravel riding is concerned, these tires will not disappoint you. Just inflate them to about 50 to 60 psi, a bit more if you're carrying cargo, and just get out there and explore. Get on the multi-use trail, get on some back roads, and you're going to be a better cyclist for it. You're going to understand what the fuss about gravel riding is all about. And you're also going to wonder, Why are people spending money on gravel bikes when you can turn these old, beautiful steel frame road bikes into perfectly great gravel bikes? Just don't turn too quickly on descents, and when you want to stop, don't pull on the suicide levers. You won't have any brakes. Odds are none of your local bike shops are going to keep this tire in stock, but you can always pick them up online for around 50 bucks a pair. I'll leave a link in the description. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And of course, if you like this video, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Once again, this has been the Kenda KrossCyclo tire.